In Bordeaux, Dr. Abnikoff was undergoing microsurgery without a general anesthetic. He wanted to make sure he kept what was left of his penis. Chapter 21. "Shit, that's torn it," said Major Featherington as they ground to a halt at a roadblock beyond Boussat. 3 gendarmes carrying submachine guns circled the car while a 4th aimed a pistol at Slime and demanded their passports. As the man flicked through the pages, Slime stared in front of him. He had been staring at the road ahead for hundreds of miles while the Major had dozed beside him, and it had all been in vain. Obviously something catastrophic had happened. Even the French police didn't man roadblocks and keep the occupants of cars covered with machine guns without good cause. But Slime was almost too tired to care. They'd have to send a cable back to the headmaster and then find a hotel, and he could get some sleep. That would be some consolation. What happened after that didn't matter now. He wasn't even worried about the letters. If Gladstone had kept them, nobody could prove he'd sent them, and in a sense he was relieved. It was all over. It wasn't. He was woken from this rhapsody of exhaustion by the car doors being opened, and with the guns aimed at them, they were ordered out. "Can't," said the Major adamantly. "Ce n'est pas possible. Ma bloody derrière est blessée, et je m'assis sur un tube de pneu." But in spite of his protests, he was dragged out and made to stand against a wall. "Bloody disgraceful," he muttered, as they were frisked. "I'd like to see a British bobby try this sort of thing with me. Ouch!" "Silence," said the sergeant. They were prodded apart while the car was searched and the luggage was laid out on the road. It included the inner tube and a bottle the Major had used to save himself the agony of getting out for a pee. After 5 minutes, 2 police cars drew up on the far side of the barrier and several men in plain clothes moved towards them. "Seem to be taking an interest in our passports," said the Major, and was promptly told to keep his trap shut. Slime stared over the wall at a row of poplars by the river and tried to keep his eyes open. It was hot in the sun, and butterflies soared and dropped about the meadow in the still air, alighting for no apparent reason on a small flower when there was a larger one only a foot away. Slime took comfort in their random choice. "Chance is all," he thought, "and I am not responsible for what has happened. Say nothing, and they can do nothing." To the little group of policemen studying his passport, things looked rather different. The ferry ticket was in it. "Entered France yesterday, and they're here already," said the Commissaire Ficard. "They must have driven all night without stopping." He looked significantly at the Major's bottle and its murky contents. "Occupation schoolmaster. Could be a cover. Anything suspicious in the luggage?" 2 plainclothes cops emptied the suitcases onto the road and went through their contents. "Nothing." "And what's the inner tube doing there?" "The other man was sitting on it, Monsieur le Commissaire. Claims to have a wounded backside." The mention of wounds decided Commissaire Ficard. "Take them in for questioning," he said. "And I want that car stripped. Nobody drives here from Calais that fast without good reason. They must have exceeded the speed limit in any case, and check with the ferries. I'm interested in these 2. As the Major was hustled into the van, he made things worse. "Keep your filthy paws off me, you oaf!" he snapped, and found himself lying on the floor. Slime went quietly. Being arrested had come as a relief to his conscience. Outside Poitiers, the Countess put the boot in. "So we need gas. If you want to pull in at the next station with a description of a glass-eyed man circulating, that's your problem. I don't want any part of it. You can drop me off here and I'll walk." "What do you suggest?" asked Gladstone. He had long since given up trying to think for himself. "That you drive up the next quiet road, and you and Al Capone Jr. take a break, and I drive on and have her filled up. Car like this isn't easy to drive, you know. You have to have had experience of non-synchro-mesh gears and—" "You double-D clutch. I'll practice." "I suppose it might be a good idea," Gladstone admitted, and turned onto a side road. For 10 minutes the Countess drove, while Peregrine sat in the back and Gladstone prayed she wouldn't strip the gears. "Okay?" she asked finally. Gladstone nodded, but Peregrine still had reservations. "How do we know you'll come back? I mean, you could just drive off and leave a clever boy like you for the cops to pick up. I've got more sense. Besides, I wanted to be rescued, and that's what you're doing. But if it'll make you any happier, I'll leave my passport with you." She got out and, rifling in her suitcase, found the right one. "I'll buy some food while I'm about it," she said. "Now, just you take it easy in the field. Have a nap, and if I'm not back inside 2 hours, call the cops." "What did she mean by that?" asked Peregrine as she drove away. Gladstone heaved himself over a gate into a field. She was joking," he said hopefully, and lay down in the grass. "I still think—" said Peregrine. "Shut up!" 3 miles further on, the Countess pulled off the road again and spent some time stuffing the gold bars down behind the back seat. Then she changed into a summer frock and put on sunglasses. All the time, her mind was busy considering possibilities. They could still be nabbed, but having come so far without being stopped, it seemed unlikely an alert was out for 2 men and a woman in a vintage Bentley. To be on the safe side, she took 2 of the little bars out, and making sure no one was in sight, hid them in the hedge behind a telephone pole. An hour later, she was back. The tank was full. She'd bought all the food they'd need, plus some very black coffee in a thermos, and a trowel. With this, she dug a hole beside the hedge and buried the 2 gold bars. If the customs found the others, she wanted something to fall back on. If not, she could always pick them up later. But best of all, as she drove on to where Gladstone was asleep and Peregrine still suspicious, 2 motorcycle cops passed without more than a glance at her. "Back on the trail, boys," she said. "We've nothing to worry about. The flicks aren't looking for us. I've just seen 2, no problems." She poured Gladstone a mug of coffee laced with sugar. "Keep a sloth awake for a week, it's so strong, and you can eat as we go." "I'm not going to be able to make Calais all the same," said Gladstone. "Not today. We're heading for Cherbourg, and you will." By midnight they were in the car park outside the ferry terminal, and Gladstone was asleep at the wheel. The Countess shook him awake. "Galahad and I will cross as foot passengers tonight," she said. "You come over the first boat in the morning, right?" Gladstone nodded. "We'll be waiting for you," she went on, and got out with Peregrine and crossed to the booking office. But it was another 2 hours before she passed through customs and immigration on an American passport in which she was named as Mrs. Natalie Walcott. Ahead of her, a youth called William Barnes settled himself in the cafeteria and ordered a Coke. He, too, was asleep when they sailed. The Countess bought a bottle of scotch at the duty-free shop and went up on deck with a plastic bag and leant over the rail with it. When she came down again, the bag and the bottle and any documents that might have suggested that she had been the Comtesse de Montcalm or Anita Blanche Wonderby were sinking with the scotch towards the bottom of the channel. By tomorrow, she would be Constance Sugg once more. By today, she must be getting tired. Slime wasn't. He had passed through the exhaustion barrier into a new dimension of lightheadedness in which he wasn't sure if he was asleep or awake. Certainly the questions being put to him by the 2 detectives who sat opposite him suggested the former. They were put quite nicely, but the questions themselves were horrible. The contrast made him feel even more unreal. "I'm not a member of any subversive organisation, and anyway, the British Secret Service isn't subversive," he said. "Then you admit you belong to a branch of it?" "No," said Slime. The 2 men gave him another cup of coffee and consulted a file on the table. "Monsieur Slime, on 12th of April you arrived in France, and on the 22nd you left again. On the 27th you came once more and departed 3rd August. The night before last you returned and drove 900 kilometres without resting. It will help if you explain." Slime tended to agree, but a seemingly distant portion of his mind took over. "I teach geography and I like France. Naturally, I come frequently on visits." "Which is presumably why you speak our language so fluently," said Inspector Rudon with a smile. "That's different. I'm not very good at languages. But an incredible student of geography to investigate the country for 900 kilometres without stopping, and at night, too, unless—" He paused and lit a cigarette. The room stank of stale tobacco. "Unless, Monsieur Slime, and I merely hypothesize, you understand, you were already in France, and someone provided you with an alibi by booking a crossing to Calais in your name." "An alibi? What would they do that for?" said Slime, trying to keep his eyes in focus. The situation was getting madder every moment. "That is for you to tell us. You know what you have been here for, what mission you and Major Featherington are on." "Can't," said Slime, "because we aren't on one. Ask the Major." "We have, and he has had the good sense to tell us." "Tell you? What's he told you?" Slime was wide awake now. "You really want to know?" Slime did, desperately. The detective left the room and returned with a signed statement a few minutes later. "Major Featherington admits to being a member of the Special Air Services. He was parachuted into the forest near Brive from a light aircraft." "From a light aircraft?" said Slime in the grip of galloping insanity. "Yes, monsieur, as you well know. He has even named the type and the airfield from which he flew. It was a Gloucester Gladiator and left from Bagshot at 0400 hours Tuesday morning." But they haven't made Gladiators since God knows when," said Slime. What on earth was the Major up to? And there couldn't be an airfield near Bagshot. The man must have gone off his rocker. "On landing, he hurt his back, but buried his parachute and made his way to the road above Collonges, where you picked him up," continued the detective. "You were to give him his orders." "His orders?" squawked Slime. "What orders, for Lord's sake?" The detective smiled. "That is for you to tell us, monsieur." Slime looked desperately round the room. Major Featherington had landed him up to his eyeballs in it now. Talk about passing the buck. I don't know what you're on about, he muttered. I haven't been anywhere near Brive, and... He gave up. "You will take my advice, Monsieur Slime," said the inspector. "You will tell us now what you know. It will save you from meeting certain gentlemen from Paris. They are not of the police, you understand, and they use different methods. I haven't met such men myself, and I hope I never have dealings with them. I believe they are not very nice." Slime cracked. But when, an hour later, he signed the statement and the inspector left the room, he was still denied the sleep he so desperately wanted. Commissaire Ficard wasn't having it. "Does the clown think we are mentally deficient?" he shouted. "We have the assassination of one of America's top political theorists and the mutilation of a Soviet delegate, and he asks us to believe that some English schoolmaster is responsible, and the other one has already admitted being SAS. Oh, no, I am not satisfied. The minister is not satisfied. The American ambassador is demanding immediate action, and the Russian too, and we have this buffoon telling us—" The phone rang. "No, I will say nothing more to the press, and I'd like to know who leaked the story yesterday. The media is crawling all over the ground in helicopters. What do you mean they can't crawl in copters? They land in them and then—" He slammed the phone down and lumbered to his feet. "Just let me lay my hands on this English turd. I'll squeeze the truth out of him if it has to come out of his asshole." "Monsieur le Commissaire, we have already told him some special agents are coming from Paris," said the inspector. "They needn't bother. By the time I'm through with him, there'll be nothing left for them to play with." Major Featherington lay on his stomach with his head turned sideways and contemplated the wall uncertainly. Like everyone else in the Boussard Gendarmerie, he hadn't the foggiest notion what had really happened at the Chateau Carmagnac, but for the moment he had spared himself the ordeal Slime was quite clearly going through. To the Major it sounded like an advanced form of hell, and he thanked God he'd given the sods what they'd wanted, a load of codswallop. And in another way it was satisfying. Old Gloddy must have done something pretty gruesome to have warranted roadblocks, helicopters, and accusations that he and Slime were agents of the Secret Service, and good luck to him. The Major had never had much time for the French, and Gloddy had given it to them where it hurt and got away with it. And he wasn't sneaking on the old ass to a lot of frog cops who were doing whatever they were doing, the Major preferred not to think about it, to Slime. Reaching over the side of the bed, he found his socks and tried to block his ears with them, and had partially succeeded when Slime stopped yelling and the cell door opened. "What about my clothes?" asked the Major with a quaver, as they dragged him to his feet. Commissaire Roudon studied his stained Y-fronts with disgust. "You are not going to need any where you are going," he said softly. "You may require shoes, though. Give him a blanket." "What's happening?" said the Major, now thoroughly frightened. "You are taking us to the spot where you buried that parachute." "Oh, my God," whimpered the Major. He could now see he had made a terrible mistake. Chapter 22. The Countess sat in the coffee lounge in Weymouth, waiting for the Bentley to come through customs. She had sent Peregrine along to the statue of George III, and would have made herself scarce too if it hadn't been for the gold bars. She had brought the Teddy Telegraph and had learnt that the assassination of Professor Botwick was already causing an international furore. Like Slime, she knew the efficiency of the French police, and she was lumbered with two half-wits. Without her to think for them, they'd end up in the hands of Scotland Yard, and with the American government now involved, the FBI would backtrack her to California, and through her various aliases to her arrival in the States, and Miss Surrey, and finally to Selsdon Road and Constance Sugg. She could see how easily it would be done. Anthony at Groxbourne, the missing revolvers, she'd made a terrible mistake there, Gladstone's account of her letters, and Peregrine's pride in being such a good shot. Worst of all, whoever had set her up had done a spectacular job. Once again she cursed men. All her life she had had to fight to maintain her independence, and now, just when she had it all made to be her quiet suburban self, she was being forced to think ruthlessly. And think she did. By the time the Bentley nosed off the ferry, she had made up her mind. She got up and walked down the road where Gladstone could see her, and waited for him. "No problems with customs?" she inquired as she climbed in behind him. "No," said Gladstone glumly. "Where's Peregrine?" "By the statue. He can wait. You and me is going to have a quiet talk." "What about?" "This," said the Countess, and put the newspaper on his lap. "What's it say?" said Gladstone, almost killing a pedestrian on a zebra crossing in his anxiety to get away. "Nothing much. Just that the French government have assured the State Department that the killers of Professor Botwick will be caught and brought to justice. The Russians appear to be taking a dim view too. Apparently your boyfriend shot their delegate as well, which must confuse the issue more than somewhat." "Oh, my God," said Gladstone, and turned down a side street and stopped. "What on earth possessed you to write those bloody letters? Keep moving. I'll tell you when to stop." "Yes, but—" "No buts. You do what I say, or I'm cutting loose and calling the first cop I spot, and you and Master C.B. will be facing an extradition order inside a week. Turn right here. There's a parking lot round the corner." Gladstone pulled in and switched off and looked at her haggardly. "Firstly, I didn't write those letters," said the Countess, "and I want to see them. Where did you stash them?" "Stash them? I didn't. You told me to burn them, and that's what I did." The Countess breathed a sigh of relief, but she wasn't showing it. "So you've no proof they ever existed?" Gladstone shook his head. He was almost too tired and frightened to speak. "Well, get this straight. You can think what you like, but if you seriously imagine I needed rescuing, you've got to be insane. Right now, you're the one in need of a rescue operation, and with what you've got between the ears, that's not going to be easy. Every cop in Europe is going to be hot on your trail before the day is out." Gladstone dragged his mind out of its stupor. "But no one knows we were at the chateau, and whoever wrote those letters does, doesn't he just? You've been set up, and a little anonymous call to the police is all it's going to take to have you in the net. You haven't a plastic bag's hope in hell of getting away. One glass eye, this old banger, and a youth with an IQ of 50. You were made for identification, and if you ask me, that's why you were chosen." Gladstone gazed at a bowling green and saw only policemen, courtrooms, lawyers and judges, and the rest of his life in a French prison. "What do you suggest we do?" he asked. "You do? Count me out. I don't mind thinking for you, but that's as far as it goes. First off, I'd say your best bet is to do a Lord Lucan, but I don't suppose you've got the money or the friends. And anyway, that still leaves that juvenile mobster on the loose. What's his background?" Gladstone told her. "Then one eminent solicitor is in for a very nasty shock," said the Countess when they'd finished. "Now, from what I've seen of his offspring, I'd say he'd been cuckolded, or his wife had a craving for lumps of lead when she was pregnant. Doesn't make your situation any cosier. Mr. Clyde Brown's going to have his son plead insanity and hurl the book at you." "What on earth can I do, then?" whimpered Gladstone. The Countess hesitated. If she suggested going to the police, he might just do it, and she wasn't having that. "Isn't there any place you can hang out for a few days and nobody ever comes?" Gladstone tried to concentrate. "I've got a cousin near Morven," he said. "She may be away, and anyway, she'd put us up. Until the police came." "Think, for Christ's sake, think where you wouldn't go." "Margate," said Gladstone suddenly. "I wouldn't be seen dead there." "Then that's where you'll go," said the Countess, with the private thought that he probably would be seen dead there. "And buy a pair of dark glasses and shave your moustache, and if I were you, I'd sell treasure here to the first dealer you can find." "Sell the Bentley?" said Gladstone. It was the final straw. "I couldn't do that." "In that case, stew in a French hoosegow for the rest of your natural." "You don't seem to know what your prospects are." "Well, I'm telling you, there's 0 - 40, permafrost all the way to the Judgment Day. Amen." "Oh, God! Oh, God! How did this ever happen? It's too horrible to be real." For a moment the Countess felt a twinge of pity for him. The world was full of people like Gladstone who played at life and only discovered reality when it kicked them in the face. "Roast lamb and abattoirs," she said inconsequentially, and was surprised when he picked up the message. "Or to the slaughter." He paused and looked at her. "What are you going to do?" "Think about it. You go and fetch Butch Cassidy, on foot. If I'm not here when you get back, stay at the Marine Hotel in Margate and register as Mr. Cassidy. I'll call you there." "Is there a Marine Hotel in Margate?" "If there isn't, choose one with 2 AA stars and I'll call them all." Gladstone trudged disconsolately from the car park and found Peregrine eating an ice cream and studying some girls in bikinis with an almost healthy interest. When they returned to the car, the Countess had vanished. She was sitting in the bus station waiting for one that would take her to Bournemouth, and from there she'd catch a train to London. "I don't trust that woman," said Peregrine grimly. "You'd better," said Gladstone. "She's all that stands between us and the reintroduction of the guillotine." "I tell you, the whole thing was a joke," said the Major. "I did not drop my parachute, so I don't know where it's buried." He was standing by the roadside surrounded by armed gendarmes. Nobody else thought it was a joke. "Monsieur chooses to play games with us," said the commissaire. "Ah, well, we too can play games. Back to the station." "Now, hang on," said the Major. "I don't know what Gladstone's done, but—" "Gladstone? Who is this Gladstone?" "No, hasn't Slime told you? I thought— What did you think? No, I want to hear from you what this man Gladstone is." Major Featherington told him. He wasn't going through Slime's experience before he cracked, and obviously Gladstone had asked for it. "It fits the description of the one who calls himself Pringle," said the inspector when he had finished. "But he rescued Botwick. Why should he then shoot him?" "Who knows why the English do things? Only the good God knows that. In the meantime, put out a full alert for him. All airports, frontier posts everywhere." "Do we ask Scotland Yard?" Commissaire Roudon hesitated. I'll have to check with Paris first, and I want those two grilled for every bit of information they've got. They must have known more about the operation than they've admitted so far, or they wouldn't be down here." He drove off in a hurry, and the Major was shoved into the back of a van and taken back to Boussard. For the rest of the day he sat answering questions, and at the end of it no one was any the wiser. Inspector Ficard made his report to an incredulous commissaire. "An adventure? The Countess wrote to him asking to be rescued? He came down in an ancient Bentley? And they came looking for a boy called Peregrine Clyde Brown because his father wanted him back? What sort of madness is this?" "It's what the other one, Slime, told us. So they had a ready-made story. We have a major political assassination to deal with, and you expect me to believe it was carried out by an English schoolteacher who—" He was interrupted by the telephone. When he put it down, Commissaire Roudon no longer knew what to think. A man answering that description and driving a Bentley crossed from Cherbourg this morning. Ticket made out in the name of Gladstone. I'll inform Paris. They can decide how to play it from now on. I'm a policeman, not a bloody politician. What shall we do with these two? Put them in a cell together and tape every single word they say. Better still, install a video camera. If they pass messages, I want to know. In any case, it's the sort of thing that'll impress the Americans. They are flying 10 anti-terrorist specialists in from Frankfurt, and they're going to need something convincing. Slime was still gibbering when they came for him. He was too feeble to resist, and what he said made even less sense than before, but they carried him down the passage and put him in a larger cell. "God almighty," said the Major when he was led in, too. "You poor sod, what did the buggers do to you? Use electrodes on your bollocks or something?" "Don't touch me," squealed Slime, squinting at him. "I don't intend to, old boy. Count me out. All I do know is that Gladstone's got something coming to him." In his hotel room in Margate, Gladstone looked at himself in the mirror. Without his moustache and wearing dark glasses, he did look different. He also looked a great deal older. Not that that would help matters in the slightest if they caught him. He'd be over 80 by the time he was released, if they ever bothered to let people out who had been partly responsible for assassinating American political advisers. He rather doubted it. He was also extremely dubious about having followed the Countess's advice, but he'd been too exhausted and numb with terror the day before to be able to think for himself, and Peregrine had been no help. He'd made matters worse by wanting to lie low in a hole in a hedge like the man in Rogue Mail. "No one would think of looking there," he'd said, "and when it's all blown over—" "It isn't going to blow over, damn you," said Gladstone. "And anyway, we'd come out stinking like a couple of ferrets with B.O. Not if we found somewhere near a stream and bought some soap. We could stock up with tins of food and dig a really deep burrow, and no one would ever know, except every farmer in the district. Anyway, cub hunting's coming up shortly, and I'm not going to be chased across country by a pack of hounds or earthed up. Use your loaf. I still don't think we should do what that woman said. She could have been lying." "And I suppose you think the Daily Telegraph's lying too," said Gladstone. "She told us it was an international gathering, and she was bloody well right." "Then why did she write you those letters? She asked us to—" "She didn't. Can't you see that? They were forgeries, and we've been framed, and so she. I can't see why. I mean, because if we're caught, and we say she wrote those letters, she can't prove she didn't." "But you burnt them." Gladstone sighed and wished to hell he hadn't. "She didn't know that. That's how I knew she was telling the truth. She hadn't a clue about the damn things, and if she'd been going to do us down, she'd have gone to the police when she went off to get that petrol. Surely that told you something." "I suppose so," said Peregrine, only to bring up the question of the revolvers. "The Major's going to be jolly angry when he finds they're missing from the armoury," he said. Gladstone stifled the retort that what Major Featherington felt was the least of their problems. If the damn man hadn't trained Peregrine to be such an efficient killer, they might not have been in this terrible mess. And mess was putting it mildly. Their fingerprints were all over the chateau. The French police must be looking for an Englishman with a glass eye. And even if they'd had the revolvers to put back, the forensic experts could easily match them with the bullet that had killed Professor Botwick. Finally, what made it insane to imagine they could resume their old lives or pretend they'd never been to France was what the Countess had said. Whoever had set them up would undoubtedly drop the word to the police. After all, it would pay the bastard to. He hadn't killed anyone, and they had, and it would get him off the hook. And only the Countess could save their necks, if she chose. So Gladstone had driven to London, had changed his traveller's checks, and leaving the Bentley with a reputable dealer in vintage cars with orders to sell as soon as he'd received the registration and licence papers, had caught the train to Margate. Peregrine had travelled in a separate carriage, and had found himself a room in a guest-house. Gladstone spent half an hour changing and shaving in a public lavatory, and had booked into the first two-star hotel to have a spare room. He hadn't been out since. Instead, he had hung about the bar, had watched the news on TV, and had read the latest report in the papers of the terrorist attack in France. But for the most part, he had stayed in his room in an abyss of self-pity and terror. Life couldn't be like this. He wasn't a criminal. He'd always detested murderers and terrorists. The police were always right, and they should never have stopped hanging. All that was changed, and he was particularly grateful that capital punishment had been abolished in France. He had lost faith in the police, too. It had been all very well to talk about going outside the law, but now that he was there, he knew no self-respecting policeman who would believe his story. And if he did, it would make not the slightest difference. And being inside meant just that. Whatever some damn fool poet had said about stone walls and iron bars, Gladstone knew better. They made prisons, and French ones at that. He'd never have a chance to urge his house on at rugger, or knock a ball about in the nets again, and the train set in the basement. He'd be known as Gladstone the murderer, and go down in the school infamy as Groxbourne's equivalent of Dr. Crippen. And how Slime would gloat. He was just plumbing this new hell when the phone rang beside his bed. Gladstone picked it up and listened to a now familiar voice. My, Brother John, it's just taken me for ages to reach you. Yes, well, the thing was, Gladstone began before the Countess cut him short. She was thinking about girls on switchboards. I'm down by the pier, so meet me there in 5 minutes and we'll have ourselves some lunch. Alone. Yes, said Gladstone. The phone went dead. With as much nonchalance as he could muster, he walked downstairs and out into the sunshine. The promenade was crowded with the sort of people he would normally have avoided at all costs, but today he was grateful for their presence. The Countess had known what she was doing when she had picked on Margate. All the same, he approached the pier cautiously, horribly conscious that he might be walking into a trap. But the Countess was sitting on a bench and rose as he came up. "Darling," she said to his surprise, and put her arm through his. "Gee, it's just marvellous to see you again." She dragged him across the road and down a side street to a car. "Where's Peregrine?" she asked as they got in. "In the amusement park, probably a shooting thing," said Gladstone. "It's called Dreamland." "Appropriately," said the Countess. "Right. So, that's where he stays temporarily while I debrief you." "Debrief me?" said Gladstone, uncertain after that "darling" how to interpret the word. "Like with astronauts and guys that have been taken prisoner." "Somewhere along the line there's got to be a connection." "Between what?" said Gladstone, more confused than ever. "Between you and me, Mr. Letter-writer. Someone who wanted to screw us both and succeeded. Go back over those letters again. Was there anything peculiar about them?" "Yes," said Gladstone vehemently. "There bloody well was. No, sweetheart, you're not reading me. Did you see where they were posted?" "In France, definitely in France, and in your envelopes, the one with the crest on the back." "And in my handwriting. You said all that, but how could you be so sure?" "Because I've got all your other letters to me about Anthony's allergies and whatnot. Their handwriting was identical." "So that puts it back in my court. Now, what did they say? And I mean exactly." As she drove slowly out of town, Gladstone went through the details of the letters and their instructions with a total recall born of fear. "Hotels you were booked into, crossing via Ostend, your whole route mapped out for you, and you did just what they said?" "Until we got to Ivry. There was another letter there saying we had to turn back or you were going to die." "So you had to come on," said the Countess, shaking her head sadly. "And that was the only one that made sense." "That night they tried to stop us by putting oil on the road in the forest. We could have been killed as it was. A man tried to hold us up." "Stop right there. Can you describe him?" Gladstone visualized the figure of Mr. Blowther covered in oil and leaves and found it difficult. But he was English, you're sure of that? "I suppose he was. He certainly sounded English. And there was another one at Calais who told the ferry people my wife had died. I don't have a wife." "I can believe it," said the Countess, "which doesn't help any. Whoever used my notepaper and knew my hand and posted the letters in France, booked you rooms in hotels, tried to stop you." "No way, they can't be crazy." "And how did they know you'd come? Come to that, why did you?" Gladstone blushed. "I couldn't leave you in the lurch," he muttered. "I mean, I'd always thought of you as a lady, and, well, it's difficult to explain, really." "And what do you think now? Am I still a lady?" "You're certainly very nice," said Gladstone judiciously. "You'd have gone to the police if you weren't." The Countess sighed. It still hadn't dawned on the poor dumb cluck that she'd have done just that if she hadn't had something to hide, like 7 gold bars on a past that would make his romantic hair stand on end. Talk about knight-errant, operative word, errant. It was only in Britain they made them so innocent. "And you're nice too," she said, and patted his knee. "It wasn't your fault you were framed, so we can't let them take you to prison, can we?" "Hopefully," said Gladstone, quivering with new devotion under the influence of the pat on the knee and the baby talk. Her next remark blew his mind. "So we go back and get the Sundance Kid and put the bite on the Clyde Browns." "We do what?" "Put the squeeze on them. You're going to need money, and if they're what you say they are, and I think, they'll pay through the nose to keep themselves out of the media. I can't see Papa CB wanting to be thrown out of the Reform." "I won't do it," said Gladstone. "It wasn't Peregrine's fault that he's wanted by the police in every country this side of the Iron Curtain. And he did the killing, not you. So Mr. Clyde Brown is going to have to work hard to pull both your irons out of the fire. And he's got influence. I've looked him up and he reeks of it. His brother's Deputy Under-Secretary of the Department of Trade and advisor to the EEC Commissioner for the Regularization, Standardization and Uniformity of Processed Food Products, meaning fish fingers. Good Lord, how did you find that out? Holborn Public Library's latest copy of Who's Who. So, we've got some muscle, and we're going to use it tonight. Tonight? But we'll never drive all the way to Virginia Water. I mean, it'll be after midnight by the time we get there. I can't think of a better time to break the news, said the Countess, and drove back to the amusement park. Chapter 23. In fact, it was almost 2 a.m. when they parked the car at the end of Pine Tree Lane and rang the doorbell of the Cones. A light came on upstairs, and presently the door opened on the chain, and Mr. Clyde Brown peered out. He had had a hard evening listening to his wife argue that it was time they called in the police, and had only managed to get to sleep with a cup of Horlicks laced with yet more whiskey and 2 mogadons. "Who is it?" he mumbled. "Me, Dad," said Peregrine, stepping under the porch light. For a moment Mr. Clyde Brown was prey to the ghastly thought that 2 mogadons and a quarter of a bottle of scotch didn't mix too well. Certainly he had to be hallucinating. The voice sounded horribly right, but the face, and in particular the hair, didn't gel with his memory of Peregrine. The last time he'd seen the lout he'd been fair-haired and with a fresh complexion. Now he looked like something the race relations. He stopped himself in time. There was a law about saying things like that. "Where the hell have you been?" he asked instead, and undid the chain. "Your mother's been at her wit's end worrying about you, and who—" The Countess and Gladstone stepped through the doorway after Peregrine. "Let's hit the lounge," said the Countess. "Somewhere nice and private. We don't want the neighbours in on this." Mr. Clyde Brown wasn't sure. The arrival of his son with black hair in the company of a woman in dark glasses and a tall, haggard man who looked vaguely familiar and definitely sinister, and this at 2 in the morning, seemed to suggest he might need every neighbour within shouting distance. The Countess's language didn't help. With the feeling that he'd stepped into a Cagney movie, he went into the sitting room and turned on the light. "Now, what's the meaning of this?" he demanded, trying to muster some authority. "Tell him, baby," said the Countess, checking the curtains were closed, to unnerve Mr. Clyde Brown still more. "Well, it's like this, Dad," said Peregrine. "I've been and gone and shot a professor." Mr. Clyde Brown's eyes bulged in his head. "I'm not hearing right," he muttered. "It's those fucking mogadons. You've been and gone and— Where the hell did you pick up that vulgar expression?" "His name was Botwick, and he was an American, and we thought he was a gangster, and I shot him through the head," said Peregrine, "with a .38 from the school armoury." Mr. Clyde Brown's knees buckled, and he slumped into a chair. "I don't believe it," he moaned. "This isn't happening." "No, not now," said Peregrine, "but it did. It's all in the papers. I shot a Russian, too, but he didn't die. At least he hasn't yet." Mr. Clyde Brown shut his eyes in an attempt to convince himself that he was having a nightmare. It failed. When he opened them again, Peregrine and these 2 awful people were still there. The Countess handed him a copy of the Times. "I've ringed the latest piece," she said. "Right now they're looking for a terrorist. Well, he's standing there in front of you." Mr. Clyde Brown hurled the paper aside. He'd read all about the murder on the train the day before, and had expressed his sense of outrage. With another sense of outrage, he got to his feet. "If this is some sort of fucking joke," he yelled, "I'll—" "Cool it, baby," said the Countess. "You want the cops in on this? Just keep bawling your head off. That's your prerogative. Or you can phone them. I guess the number's still 999. "I know what the fucking number is," shouted Mr. Clyde Brown, rather more quietly. "So, he's your son. You want him up on a murder rap? Call them up. It's no skin off my nose. I don't go round bumping people off." Mr. Clyde Brown looked from her to Peregrine and back again. "You're bluffing. He didn't shoot anyone. It's all a lie. You're trying to blackmail me. Well, let me tell you—" "Oh, sure, go ahead and phone. Tell them you've got 2 blackmailers and a son who just happens to be a murderer on your hands and you don't know what to do. We'll wait here for you. No sweat." Beads of it broke out on Mr. Clyde Brown's forehead. "Tell me you didn't do it," he said to Peregrine. "I want you to say it, and I want to hear it." "I shot a professor, Dad. I've told you that already." "I know you have—" He was interrupted by the entrance of his wife. For a long moment she stood in the doorway gazing at Peregrine. "Oh, my poor boy!" she cried, rushing forward and gathering him to her. "What have they done to you?" "Nothing, Mum, nothing at all." "But where have you been, and why is your hair that colour?" "That's part of the disguise. I've been to France, and shot an American professor. Through the head, didn't you say?" said Mr. Clyde Brown, helping himself to more whiskey. He didn't give a damn what the stuff did with the mogadons any longer. A quiet death was preferable. "Oh, my poor darling," said Mrs. Clyde Brown, who still hadn't got the message. "I've been so worried about you." In the corner, Mr. Clyde Brown was heard to mutter something about her not knowing what worry was, yet. The Countess got up and moved towards the door. Mr. Clyde Brown hit it first. "Where do you think you're fucking going?" he shouted. Mrs. Clyde Brown turned on him. "How dare dare you use that filthy word in my house?" she screamed. "And in front of Peregrine and these, The Countess smiled sweetly. "Let me introduce myself," she said. "My name's Deirdre, Countess de Montcalm. And please don't apologise for your husband's language. He's just a little overwrought. And now, if you'll excuse us..." Mr. Clyde Brown didn't budge. "You're not leaving this house until I've got to the bottom of this murder?" asked the Countess. "And, of course, there's the little matter of kidnapping, too, but I don't suppose that's so important." "I didn't kidnap you," said Peregrine, and blew his father's mind still further. If the sod was prepared to deny kidnapping while openly admitting he'd murdered, he had to be telling the truth. "All right," he said. "How much do you want?" The Countess hesitated and made up her mind not to go back to American slang. Kensington English would hit Mrs. Clyde Brown's gentility harder. "Really," she said, "if it weren't for the obvious fact that you're not yourself, I would find your attitude extremely sordid." "You would you? Well, let me tell you, I know sordidity when I see it, and I know blackmailers. And add that lot to your calling yourself a countess and—" "But she is a countess," said Peregrine as his father ran out of words. "I saw her passport, and she lives in this jolly great chateau. It's called Carmagnac, and it's ever so nice, and it's there I shot the professor." "Oh, you never did," said Mrs. Clyde Brown reproachfully. "You're making it up." "Christ!" said Mr. Clyde Brown and downed his scotch. "Will you keep out of this? We've enough—" "I most certainly won't," retorted Mrs. Clyde Brown. "I'm his mother, and he's a fucking murderer. M-U-R-D. I know how to spell, thank you very much. And he's not, are you, darling?" "No," said Peregrine. "All I did was shoot him. I didn't know he was—" No, you wouldn't know mass murder from petty larceny," shouted his father, and grabbed the paper. "Well, the rest of the bloody world knows." "If I might just get a word in," said the Countess, "the rest of the world doesn't know. Yet. Of course, in time, the French police will be in touch with Scotland Yard. But if we could come to some arrangement—" "I've already asked you how much you're demanding, you blackmailing bitch. Now spit it out." The Countess looked at him nastily, but kept her cool. "For a man supposedly at the top of your profession, you really are remarkably obtuse," she said. "The truism about the law applies. You're an ass. And what's more, if you don't moderate your language, I shall call the police myself." "Oh, you mustn't!" wailed Mrs. Clyde Brown, on whose dim intelligence it had slowly dawned that Peregrine really was in danger. Mr. Clyde Brown edged onto a chair. "All right," he said. "What are you suggesting?" "Immunity," she said simply. "But first I would like a nice cup of tea. It's been a hard 2 days getting your son out of France, and—" "Get it," Mr. Clyde Brown told his wife. "But, Oscar, I said get it, and I meant get it, and stop blubbing, for God's sake. I want to hear what this lady has to say." Still sobbing, Mrs. Clyde Brown left the room. By the time she returned with the tea tray, Mr. Clyde Brown was staring at the Countess with something approaching respect. He was also drained of all emotion except terror. In a life devoted to the belief that all women were an intellectual subspecies whose sole purpose was to cook meals and have babies, he had never before come across such a powerful intelligence. "And what about that?" he asked, glaring with horror at Gladstone. "I have arranged his future," said the Countess. "I won't say where, though it may be in Brazil." "But I don't want to go to Brazil," squawked Gladstone, and was promptly told to hold his tongue. "Or it may be somewhere else. The point is that Mr. Gladstone is going to die." On the couch, Gladstone whimpered. Mr. Clyde Brown perked up. This woman knew her onions. "And about time, too," he said. "Yeah, and isn't it time you phoned your brother?" asked the Countess. "The sooner he can get the ball rolling, the sooner we can wrap this up. And now, if you'll excuse us—" This time, Mr. Clyde Brown didn't try and stop her. He knew when he was beaten. "How will I get in touch with you if—" "You won't, honey," said the Countess, patting his ashen cheek. "From now on, the ball's in your court." "Well, really," said Mrs. Clyde Brown, "she didn't even touch her tea." "Bugger tea. Take that murderous bastard upstairs and bleach his hair back to normal." "But we haven't any peroxide, and—" "Use whatever you pour down the lavatory. Even if his hair falls out, it'll be better than nothing." And he hurried down the passage to the study and phoned his brother. The Countess drove steadily towards London. She didn't want to be stopped by a patrol car, and she had to get back into the sprawl of the metropolis and anonymity in case Mr. Clyde Brown's brother refused to cooperate. "I've booked you a room at Heathrow," she said. "But I don't want to go to Brazil," said Gladstone. "So you're not going. You flew in on a Dan Air flight from Zimbabwe, arrival time 6 a.m., name of Harrison. And you're not to be disturbed. It's all arranged. I'll pick you up round noon for the funeral." "Funeral? What funeral?" "Yours, sweetheart. Mr. Gladstone's going to die, officially. And don't take on so. You'll get used to the afterlife." Gladstone doubted it. Slime didn't. Given the chance, he'd have willingly died. Once again he was being interrogated, this time by 3 American agents from Frankfurt who were under the impression that he had spent time in Libya. In another room, Major Featherington was getting the same treatment. Unfortunately, he had. "In the war," he moaned, "in the bloody war! Yom Kippur or the 7 days? In the 8th Army, a desert rat, for God's sake!" "You can say that again, bud. You and Gaddafi both." "I'm talking about the war, the real war, the one against the Africa Corps." "The who?" said one of the men, who obviously had never heard of any war before Vietnam. "The Germans! You must know about Rommel. You tell us, he trained you or something?" "Damn near killed me," said the Major, rather wishing he had. "So you were threatened into this, is that what you're saying?" "No, I'm not. I'm not in this, whatever it is. I was sent down here by the headmaster to try to find Clyde Brown." "Tell us something new." "We've been through that routine before." "But there's nothing else to tell. And what are you doing with that fucking hypodermic?" In the passage outside, Commissaire Rudon, the man from the Quai d'Orsay, listened with interest. "The space shuttle and truth drugs are not an inkling of history," said Monsieur Lapence. "So much for the special relationship. The President will be pleased." "Monsieur," said the Commissaire, who hadn't a clue what the Foreign Office man was talking about, "between London and Washington, we are standing at the end of an era." Commissaire Rudon looked up and down the passage. "If you say so, monsieur," he said. Eras meant nothing to him. "From now on, Britain will be what she always should have been, a dependency of France," continued Monsieur Lapence, indulging in his taste for rhetoric. "The idiots in Whitehall have played into our hands." "You really think the British government sent these men?" "It's not what I think that matters, Commissaire. It is what those charming Americans in there report to Washington. But Gaddafi has nothing to do with this, nor have the Red Brigade or any other terrorist group. It was a stratagem to worsen our relationship with the United States, and it has failed." "I hadn't thought of it like that," said the Commissaire. "You will, Monsieur Rudon. From now on, you will. Bear that in mind, and no press releases. You will simply tell the press that the affair is of too delicate a nature diplomatically to speak about it, since British intelligence officers... You will stop yourself there in some confusion, and demand that what you have just said is not to be reported. Is that clear?" "Absolutely." "If you fail in the duty, you will have failed France," said Monsieur Lapence. "Remember that. And now, to avoid listening to that terrible noise, I will report to the Minister." Inside the interrogation room, Major Featherington, under the influence of the drugs he had been given, was living up to Henry Ford's dictum that history was bunk. "I'll tell you something," said the chief American investigator, after the Major had babbled on for the 10th time about dog-turds in Shrewsbury. "You can say what you like about the Limeys, but when they make 'em tough." "Not the other one," said the medical expert. "He's plain loco. Give him a shot of this stuff and he'll be psychotic for life." "What's all this shit about letters mean?" "Zero. He's scrambled eggs cerebral-wise." "So what have we got? 2 names, Gladstone and Clyde Brown. They're not going to like this in Washington." In Whitehall, Deputy Under-Secretary Cecil Clyde Brown, CBE, sat staring dismally at a pigeon on the roof opposite, and wondered what was being decided. Somewhere nearby, the Home Secretary, the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, the Police Commissioner, and the head of MI5 held his future in their hands. More accurately, they held a telex from the British ambassador in Paris. "Well," asked the Foreign Secretary when they all had their fill of the ghastly news, "do we hand the little bugger over, or do we not?" The Chief Commissioner of Police and the head of MI5 shook their heads. "Out of the question," said MI5. "I've had a look at the imbecile, and if the French get their hands on him, I've no doubt they can program him to say anything. Not that they'd need much for him to say. Nobody'd believe his story anyway." "Not sure I do," muttered the Foreign Secretary. "This couldn't be some frightful CIA plot, could it? I've never been entirely happy about your American counterparts, since they tried those damned explosive clams on Castro. I can't see what they could possibly gain from it. It's more likely to be KGB-inspired." The Foreign Secretary looked nostalgically at a globe of the world which still showed India as part of the empire. "Where have you got the brute?" he asked presently. "In a safe house in Aldershot." The name inspired the Foreign Secretary. "I don't suppose you could arrange for him to have an accident, or Lassa fever or something?" "It's feasible, but with the man Gladstone on the loose—" The Home Secretary intervened. "I'm not prepared to be party to an unofficial execution," he said hurriedly. "I mean, if this got out—" "It is out, damn it, whatever it is. And we've got to decide something now. The American ambassador is due at 2, and with the confounded French putting it about that there's an SAS hit squad conducting an assassination campaign to worsen Franco-US relations, I've got to tell the fellow something credible. I know he's from Arkansas, but—" "The truth, perhaps," murmured the Home Secretary. "They say it always comes out in the end." "They can say what they bloody well please, but I haven't spent 40 years in the Foreign Service to believe that one, and from what I can tell, no one knows what the truth is." Now, I suppose we could always put the blame on the IRA, said MI5. It's as good a ruse as any, and it won't do the Irish lobby in Washington any harm to get a kick in the teeth. Then what the hell do we do with Clyde Brown? Call the little bastard O'Brien? I know this fellow from Arkansas thinks Bombay is part of a B-52, but he's not going to fall for anything as dumb as an Irish dimension. It was the police commissioner who came up with the answer. I should have thought the obvious thing to do was put the lad in the SAS. He's obviously a born killer, and it's the last place they're going to look. The first, you mean, said the Foreign Secretary, but the police commissioner held his ground. The last. If we'd organised a hit squad along these lunatic lines with vintage Bentleys and men with glass eyes, nobody would think the SAS were involved. They're experts and professionals. But this raving Major Featherington's already admitted, which makes it certain no one seriously believes he is. The man's in his mid-50s. In any case, he has nothing to do with it. He was in the UK at the time of the murder. The Home Secretary backed him up. It's the same with Slime. The headmaster sent them both off. Splendid, said the Foreign Secretary. So how do I explain to this Arkansas beef baron that the bloody boy isn't in the SAS when he is? MI5 smiled. I think you can leave that safely to me, he said. The Foreign Secretary had his doubts. He was thinking about Blake, Philby and Blunt. Safely? He asked. MI5 nodded. By the time the American ambassador arrived, a hooded figure was standing in the anteroom. Of course, we wouldn't disclose the identity of any of our men in the Special Air Services, said the Foreign Secretary after asking politely about the health of the ambassador's cattle and learning that it was actually into natural gas and came from Texas. In ordinary circumstances, that is, but we're prepared to make an exception in this case. He pressed a bell on his desk and the hooded figure entered. Sergeant Clyde Brown, remove your balaclava, he said. We're going to want more identification than that, said the ambassador, staring at the large individual with the walrus moustache. Fingerprints. I mean, the French have got those of the assassin, haven't they? I guess so. He was still guessing when the man, having given his fingerprints weight, size of shoes and height in centimetres, to confuse the issue still further, donned his balaclava helmet and left the room. Haven't I seen him someplace else? Inquired the ambassador. Possibly, said the Foreign Secretary loftily. Between ourselves, I understand him to be in charge of certain, unmentionable security operations at Buckingham Palace. Oh, I guess that explains it then. Those goddamn Frenchies seem to have screwed things up again. I'll have our security chief check the details, but they won't fit the description I'd been given. The killer was shorter and 20 years younger. And doubtless French, said the Foreign Secretary, and saw him to the door. Who on earth was that grisly-looking blighter? He asked MI5 when the ambassador's armour-plated limousine was safely out of the way. And what are those unmentionable duties at Buck House? Actually, he's captain of the Queen's Heads, said MI5. I thought that was rather a nice touch. Captain of... You mean he's a lavatory attendant? Good Lord, man. No wonder that blasted Yank guest had seen him before. He stopped and looked at MI5 suspiciously. He's not another swine like Blunt, is he? Has he had positive vetting? Oh, absolutely. Comes from an eminently respectable Catholic family in the Falls Road area of Belfast. Anyway, he's only in charge of the visitors' loos. Don't suppose he's ever set eyes on Her Majesty. I should bloody well hope not. And if I were in your shoes, I'd see to it she doesn't set eyes on the Waller. Wouldn't blame her for setting those damn corgis on the brute. Anyway, thank the Lord that's settled. Even the present American administration wouldn't have the gall to start checking the palace. Chapter 24. As the cortege drove slowly out of the crematorium, Gladstone stared miserably at the back of the chauffeur's head. It was one of the ironies of having attended his own funeral that he should now recall that chauffeur came from the French for stoker. Presumably even modern furnaces had to be attended by somebody to take out the ashes. Whoever had just been incinerated, probably an unidentified tramp or something they'd finished with in the dissecting rooms at one of the teaching hospitals, had gone to his maker bearing Gladstone's name. It was there on the death certificate, and a little obituary would shortly appear in the old Groxbornian. The great adventure had gone up in smoke. I know just how you feel, said the Countess, patting his hand. Mourir, c'est partir un peu. What? Said Gladstone. To die is to part a little. But it won't be for long. By the time the surgeon's finished with you, you'll be a new man. Surgeon? Said Gladstone. What bloody surgeon? The plastic one. He's said to be terribly good with burns. Burns? Considering where I'm supposed to be, it'd have to be fucking miraculous. There's no need to use that sort of language, said the Countess sharply. I haven't gone to all this trouble and expense to have you swearing like a trooper. Gladstone considered the change in her own language and said nothing. There was something about this extraordinary woman that frightened him, and it was only when she stopped the car at the top of Hampstead Heath and they were walking down to the tube station that he brought up the matter of burns and plastic surgery. What the hell do I need plastic surgery for? Apart from whoever went up in that coffin. Well, we won't go into that now, said the Countess. That's all past and done with. You've got to look to the future, and since you refuse to go to Brazil, you'll just have to do what I tell you. The main thing will be to alter the shape of your ears. They're the giveaway, and the police always look for them first. But with this wig on, no one can see my blasted ears, said Gladstone. I'm not going to be married to a man with a toupee. It's unbecoming, and anyway, won't fit your image. As for the rest of you—" But Gladstone wasn't listening. "Did you say married?" he asked. "Of course I did. You don't imagine for one moment that I'm going to live in sin with you, do you?" Half an hour later, Gladstone entered a clinic near Portland Place. On the door, a brass plaque seemed to suggest its main business lay in abortions, but Gladstone no longer cared. It was enough to know he was going to be married. It was infinitely preferable to spending the rest of his life in Brazil. "My hero," said the Countess, kissing him lightly on the cheek. "Now don't forget to sign your name as Mr. Smith." "Slimes where?" said the headmaster when Major Featherington returned a week later in the company of 2 special branch officers. "Rampton," said the Major. "Rampton? But that's that ghastly hospital for the criminally insane, isn't it? And what on earth have you been doing to your face?" "Dog-turd in Shrewsbury," said the Major, who hadn't fully recovered from the effects of the truth drug and his hours of interrogation. "But that was your backside. And now you come back here with a face looking like a dog-turd in Shrewsbury," said the Major. "Christ," said the headmaster. If Slime was sufficiently off his rocker to be in Rampton, the Major could do with some treatment himself. "And what about Gladstone?" "That's what we've come to see you about," said one of the men, and produced his identification. The headmaster examined it cautiously. "Special branch?" he asked weakly. The man nodded. "Now, about Mr. Gladstone, sir," he said. "We're going to require access to his rooms, and we'd be glad if you answered a few questions. For instance, were you aware that he had any communist inclinations?" "Communistic? I thought the sod belonged to the Monday Club. He certainly read the Daily Telegraph." "That could have been cover. Homosexual tendencies? Excessive drinking? Chip on his social shoulder? Anything of that sort?" "All of it," said the headmaster fervently, and glanced out of the window. A number of soldiers had driven up in a lorry and were debussing on the drive. "What the hell are they doing there?" "If you'll just sign this," said the special branch man, and placed a document on his desk. The headmaster read it through with increasing alarm. "The Official Secrets Act? You want me to sign—" "Just a simple precaution, sir, nothing more. Of course, if you'd prefer to face criminal proceedings in connection with certain offences against the person committed in Belfast—" "Belfast? I've never been anywhere near Belfast," said the headmaster, beginning to think he'd shortly be joining Slime in a padded cell. "You come here and tell me to sign the Official Secrets Act or be charged—" "Dear God, where's that pen?" He scrawled his signature at the bottom of the form. "And now the key to the school armoury, if you don't mind." The headmaster handed it over, and while one of the men took it out to the officer in charge of the squad, the other settled himself in a chair. "I think I must warn you that should anybody make inquiries about Mr. Gladstone or a certain ex-pupil, it will be in your interest not to say anything," he said. "The Belfast charges are still outstanding, and having signed the Official Secrets Act, the consequences could be slightly unfortunate. Need I say more?" "No," said the headmaster indistinctly. "But what am I going to tell Mr. Clyde Brown?" "Who, sir?" "Christ," said the headmaster. Outside, the soldiers had begun to load the lorry with all the weapons from the armoury. That was a relief, anyway. He'd never liked the bloody things. "And now, if you'll just take me up to Gladstone's rooms." They crossed the quad and climbed the staircase. "Not that I suppose we'll find anything of interest," said the special branch man. "When the Russians employ a sleeper, they do things thoroughly. Probably recruited the traitor when he was at Cambridge." "Cambridge? I never dreamed that Gladstone had been anywhere near a university. He certainly never mentioned it." "Obviously not. The man's clearly an expert. One only has to look at the sort of books he surrounded himself with to see that." The headmaster gazed at the collected works of Sapper and felt peculiar. "I really can't believe it even now," he said. "Gladstone was a ghastly man, but he didn't have the brains to be what do you call it?" "A sleeper," said the special branch man, putting the cigar box containing the Countess's letters in a plastic bag. "Probably in code." The headmaster tried to look on the bright side. "Well, at least I won't have the damn man around me any more," he said. "That's some relief. Have you any idea where he is?" The special branch man hesitated. "No harm in telling you now. We found his Bentley parked near Tilbury yesterday. An East German tramp steamer sailed on Wednesday night." They went back to the headmaster's study. "I think that'll be all we require for the moment, sir. If anything should occur to you that might be of use to us, we'll be grateful if you'd call this number. It's a phone drop, so just leave your name." "And what about him?" asked the headmaster, glancing anxiously at Major Featherington. "What about him? Well, I can't have a master going about muttering dog-turd in Shrewsbury in front of the boys all the time. He's as mad as a hatter." "You should see Mr. Slime." said the Special Branch man, grimly. "The Major's all right. He's a hero by comparison, and you can always use him as groundsman." But it was in Pine Tree Lane that feelings were most mixed. "I'll never forgive you! Never!" wailed Mrs. Clyde Brown, ignoring the presence of 10 undercover agents dressed in overalls, who had already installed double glazing and were now redecorating the entire house. "To think that I'll never see poor Peregrine again!" "Oh, I don't know," said Mr. Clyde Brown cheerfully. "He'll probably get leave once in a while. They can't keep a garrison in Antarctica forever." "But he isn't used to the cold, and he's got such a delicate chest." "There is that," said Mr. Clyde Brown, almost gaily. "You can always go out and put flowers on his grave, and he certainly won't need embalming. Things keep forever on ice." "You murdering—" "No, I don't want flock fleur-de-lis in the kitchen," she yelled, as one of the agents tactfully interposed a wallpaper pattern book between them. "And you can stop painting the hall pink. That's a William Morris design." Mr. Clyde Brown made himself scarce. He had an interesting divorce case to consider involving custody of a domestic cat, and now that Peregrine was out of the way, it might be advantageous to goad his own wife a little further. In Bognor Regis, Gladstone looked at his face in the bathroom mirror and failed to recognise himself. It wasn't the first time, but it still shook him to see someone he didn't know staring with such horrid amazement back at him, and horrid was the word. The Countess had been right in claiming the plastic surgeon was good with burns, though in Gladstone's livid opinion she ought to have said at them. "Just let me get my hands on the sod!" he had shouted when the bandages had been removed and he had finally been allowed the use of a mirror. "He must have used a bloody flamethrower! Where are my blasted eyebrows?" "In the disposal bin," said the sister in charge. "Anyway, you specifically asked for total non-recognitive surgery." "Non-recog-buggered? I did nothing of the sort. I came in here expecting to have my ears adjusted, not to be turned into something that would frighten a fucking punk Dalek into a fit. And why am I as bald as a coot?" "We did a scalp transplant with another patient. He had alopecia totalis. It's taken very well." "Then what have I got, then? Galloping fucking ringworm?" "It'll save you having to brush your hair again." "And shave," said Gladstone. "What did you swap my face with? Some terminal leper?" "That's called the Spitfire effect," said the sister. "Lots of pilots who crashed in the Battle of Britain looked like that." "In that case, I'd have thought the Messerschmitt effect would have been more appropriate," said Gladstone. "Am I going to have to spend the rest of my life with these pustules? There's one actually swelling on what's left of my nose." "They're just leeches. We use them for scavenging." "Shit!" said Gladstone, and had to be held down to prevent him from trying to dislodge the things. "We'll have to give you a sedative if you don't behave like a good boy." "Madam," said Gladstone, managing to rally some dignity under threat of the needle, "I have had some considerable experience of boys, and no sane one would allow his face to be used as a watering hole for scavenging leeches. I could get tetanus or die from loss of blood." "Nonsense. We ensure they're all perfectly healthy, and they're only cleaning up the scar tissue." "In that case they'll get bloody awful indigestion," said Gladstone. "They've got enough grub there for the Lord Mayor's banquet. And get that sod out of my left nostril. I can't with my hands in bandages. And what's that for?" "Fingerprint removal," said the sister, and left Gladstone to contemplate a life without any physical means of identification. Even his closest friends wouldn't know him now, or want to. But at least the Countess had been delighted. "Darling," she said when she came to collect him, "you look wonderful." "You've got fucking peculiar tastes, is all I can say," said Gladstone bitterly, and was promptly rebuked for using filthy language. "You were something hush-hush in the war, and you'd rather not talk about it. That's the line you'll have to take," she said, "and from now on you're to call me Bobby." "But that's a boy's name," said Gladstone, wondering if he was about to marry some sort of lesbian with a truly horrific lust for disfigured men. It was a wonder he hadn't had a sex-change operation. "It's nice and 30-ish. Lots of girls were called Bobby then, and it'll blend with the peak." Gladstone shuddered. He loathed peaks, and it was clear he was no longer going to be allowed to call his life his own, let alone his face. It had proved only too true. After a swift registry marriage, at which he had had to declare himself to be Clarence Sopwith Hilary, a combination of names Gladstone found personally humiliating, unnecessarily provocative, and in the case of the last, in exceedingly bad taste, they had driven on in Bobby's dinky Minnie. "We mustn't be thought to consider ourselves a cut above the neighbours, Clarence," she told Gladstone, who knew damn well he was a hell of a lot of cuts just about everywhere else, to the bungalow in Bognor Regis. It had fulfilled his direst expectations. From its green-tiled roof to the petunias bordering the weedless lawn and the cubistic carpet in the drawing-room, it represented everything he had most despised. "But it's pure Art Deco, Clarence. I mean, it's us. "It may be you," said Gladstone, "but I'm damned if it's me. Can't you call me something other than Clarence? It's almost as foul as Cecil." "I shall call you Soppy, darling, and this is Beatrice." "Hell," said Gladstone, who had just been bitten on the ankle by the peak. Now, as he stood gazing at his own nonentity in the bathroom, he knew he was beaten. They would play bridge all evening with the shearers, and he'd get told off for bidding badly and have to make the coffee and have to take that bloody Beatrice for a pee before going to bed. And he knew what they'd drink, creme de menthe. Constance Sugg had returned to her roots. In a hedge in South Armagh, Peregrine, now number 960401, stared through the night sight of his rifle at the figure moving in the field below. It could be a Garda, but he didn't care. He'd already notched up 5 IRA men, 2 poachers and an off-duty RUC constable, not to mention an army Land Rover, to such awful effect that even the local Protestants had joined with the IRA in declaring his 16 square miles a no-go area, and the army avoided the place. Peregrine didn't care. He was in his element, doing what he had been trained to do. And every few weeks an unmanned balloon, there'd been an unfortunate incident with a helicopter, would drift over for him to shoot down and collect his ammunition and supplies. Not that he needed the latter. He'd already bagged a sheep for his supper in the burrow he'd dug halfway down an old well, and was rather looking forward to it. The Major had said one should live off the land, and he did. He squeezed the trigger and watched the man drop. Then he obeyed another of the Major's dicta, that an army marched on its stomach, and crawled the 2 miles back to his hideout. Presently, in the happy knowledge he was doing exactly what he'd been told, he pulled his rifle through and oiled it, and settled down to leg of lamb.